Okay, greetings, welcome, hello, welcome back to our little philosophy club here in Bittet in the middle of France, the heartland of old Gaul. We love it here. It's cold because of winter, and we were going to have lots of French-speaking visitors, but they are not here, so I can do this in English. Merci. But if French people want to come and be part of it, we can do it bilingual. That's fine. So, as usual, I'm going to start with a kind of recap of what I've been up to this week. It's been quite a fun week, busy as usual, and so probably the most exciting thing I've been up to is chairing the International Delphic Academy meeting, which took place on Friday the 13th, actually, which seems an appropriate day for it, because it's a cosmic number, and we only meet once a term as a formal board, so we met on Friday, and we had a good, group of people that were invited. It's a sort of honorary thing to sit on the board. We had colleagues joining us from Kashmir, Srinagar, America, New York, Norway, up in Molde, Germany, Berlin, and other places, Britain and France, obviously. So it was a very international, meeting. So what is the International Delphic Academy? Well, we're the sort of think tank associated with the Delphic Games, which the logo for is behind me in a sort of flag thing, set up 30 years ago in Berlin by my friend Christian Kirsch and his partner, Waltraud Kretschmann, and they've been, for the last 30 years, organising Delphic Games around the planet. The idea is to revive what was in classical antiquity for 1,000 years, a kind of rival to the Olympic Games. The Olympic Games are great. The Greeks invented, competitive sports, javelin, running, wrestling, and it was a chance for people to show off their prowess and all that. That's important, but the Delphic Games are for the connoisseurs, the artists, the intellectuals, and they took place staggered years, so it was never in the same year as the Olympic Games, and they were at Delphi under the aegis of Apollo, whose room we're sitting in, and the Temple of Apollo was where they would do performances, and theatre, which was invented by the Greeks as a way of sublimating conflict and pain, and to produce what Aristotle called catharsis, the purification of one's emotions through art, through theatre. So they would go there, and some of the most famous of the Athenian dramatists went and competed in the Delphic Games. To win the prize there was really important. It wasn't money, you didn't get money, you got a laurel wreath from the sacred laurel, which is Apollo's plant tree. And of course it was the venue of the Delphic Oracle, which had been going for 1,500 years before the birth of Christ. I mean, it was there in 1500 BC already. It's thought founded by Minoans who came to Delphi. The legend is that Apollo sent a shoal of dolphins to guide the boat, which was off course, to Delphi, which is named after, it's the same as the dolphin. And of course, the Dauphin, France, was like Prince of Wales, the next in line for the throne was called the Dolphin, and he was from near here in Berry, or Dauphin was a region of France. So it's interesting why, these things are all interconnected, and the dolphin is one of the other most intelligent mammals on this planet, probably more intelligent than humans, some would argue. And scientists have studied dolphin communication and thought, and it's pretty advanced stuff. So Apollo knew all that, I think, and sent a shoal to guide to his oracle. So what were we talking about? Well, we're talking about, the work of academics. What I want is to get knowledge about the International Delphic Academy out in every university on the planet and every school, because all these school children are studying away. Some of them are lucky enough to do classics, learning about ancient Greece and Rome and Persia and, the great fountainhead of philosophy, Aristotle and Plato and, the merry band. But they don't learn anything about the Delphic Games. Nobody knows it ever happened. The Olympic Games have stolen all our thunder. And what we're saying as an academy is, well, hang on, no wonder the world's so screwed up, because all we care about is physical prowess and beating the other lot and winning the big prizes and being the fastest, strongest, whatever. No, it's beauty that matters. Apollo is the god with the muses, who were his heavenly choir. Apollo was known as Musigates, which meant the leader of the muses. They were the divine choir that provide the music in heaven. And this idea carried forward into Christianity, the idea that the angels are singing in heaven. It's a Greek idea, the muses are singing in heaven. And so they should be on earth. So beauty, music means what muses do. Musicae is from the muse. So anyway, we've got a whole bunch of stuff to research, like how old, who founded these games, can we reconstruct who won each year, each of the 4 years, every 4 years there was the Delphic Games. We know the history of the modern ones, the 7 that have happened since 1994. But, there's lots of detailed nuances to explore. And, sorry, why bother? Well, the whole thing is a peace project. Obviously, that's why I'm doing it. Because in the ancient world, you couldn't compete in the Delphic Games if your city-state was involved in a war. If you were a Spartan and you just invaded somewhere, you were disallowed from going to the games. Only peace-loving people could compete in the Delphic Games. Because you can't do creativity and art and music and dance with war and killing going on. So the Delphic priests and priestesses who ran the games were very strict on this. We need to research the details. So, for instance, in modern Europe, we have a war going on between Ukraine and Russia. One side was the aggressor and one side not. What's the rule about the Delphic Games? Well, certainly the aggressor city-state shouldn't be allowed to compete. That's pretty clear, but I want to find out, if possible, from the archives, go through ancient histories and find out what we can about the Delphic Games. There's only one PhD ever been written about them, which is ridiculous. I want to encourage more. What we do know is that Aristotle went to, the whole thing burnt down. Delphi caught fire in the 300s BC. And it's tragic. I've been to Delphi. It's one of the most beautiful places on earth. And it all caught fire, the temples and everything. And the archives went up in smoke. They were on scrolls, and they would have had the continuous history of the Delphic Games since the beginning. They went up in smoke. So the Delphic priests and priestesses, the Amphictyony that ran it, invited Aristotle to come and try and reconstruct the history from the charred remnants. Well, where's that gone? Where's his research? It's not in his published works. Has that gone too? Or is it lurking in some hidden library in a Greek island somewhere? I hope. So let's get the archaeologists out finding the remnants. The other thing I want to say, and that's very exciting, is about the Delphic Games and the Academy. We also have got a very ambitious project. We want to relaunch the Delphic Oracle. Because the Delphic Oracle was there for from about 1500 BC to about 490 AD, so that's about 2,000 years. And it was the go-to place for advice if you were a king, an emperor, just somebody that needed advice with their life. Should they marry this person or that person, kind of stuff. You'd go to the Delphic Oracle. And these were trained priestesses called the Pythias, who were basically trained in transpersonal awareness. They would go into a light trance, they would download a sort of message from the divine intelligence, which they put into gnomic verse. They were, and this was a skill they learned. And we know quite a lot about some of them. I mean, even the Romans used to go and consult the Delphic Oracle as they were coming into being a recognised city-state in its own right. And Numa Pompilius, the greatest king of Rome, revered and respected Apollo and the Delphic Oracle. Anybody who was anybody did. So what we're trying to do is revive it. And I think that in a world of uncertainty, anxiety, neuroses, conflicts, AI is great. It's a kind of oracle, ChatGPT. You can ask it questions. But I think there's something about human accessing divine intelligence, which is also important, that we need to reactivate that part of our human nature, I think, that divine intelligence access point. Because if you think about it, in the Middle East, there are a lot of prophet wars going on. Muslims, Jews and Christians are fighting each other because they say their prophet is the best one. A prophet, which is a Greek word, is somebody who can access oracular wisdom. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm not going to adjudicate between whether Moses, Muhammad or Jesus was the greatest of these prophets. They all served their time, they all did their thing. But what we now need as a planet is to re-access oracular wisdom for all of us. Or we're not going to survive. We can't just get there with ChatGPT. It keeps making mistakes. Okay, that's one thing I've been up to, and that was very exciting. I wanted to share that. And we've got a good team of people, active. And if you have a particular interest, if anyone listening to this wants to get involved, help us re-establish the Delphic Oracle, get involved with the Delphic intellectual work, please contact. As coordinator of the Delphic Academy, that's my job. And we're hoping we'll have European Delphic Games in Paris, because we think it's a good venue. Before too long, in a couple of years' time or something. Okay, that's that. The other thing I want to announce that I'm working on tirelessly is my 99 Names of Peace book, of course. And it's going really well, actually. I was determined to finish it by Christmas Eve. Well, I'm going to get there 4 days in advance.
Oh.
It'll be done 4 days before Christmas Eve, I hope, at the current rate.
It's a miracle.
It is a miracle, really. And I've just been, let me share some of the language I've just done. I just did Georgian, extraordinary, complicated, amazing language, Tahiti, German, important, Dutch. I did Kazakh from Kazakhstan, which is a Turkish language, Estonian from Estonia, which is a language like Finnish, it's an Uralic language, and very ancient shamanic type language, Russian, Kyrgyz, Kyrgyzstan, and Yiddish. And I want to share something about the Yiddish that I've been discovering, because each of these languages I've spent in the past a whole day or two researching the details of linguistically and also their literatures, because I'm interested in the literature and the language and the vocabularies. Yiddish is fascinating. It's a blend it's a form of German, actually, with strong influence from Hebrew and then also Aramaic and stuff. So it was spoken by the Jewish community of the Rhineland of Germany from about the 1200s onwards. So these were Jewish people who'd settled in Germany, what we now call Germany. It was then the Holy Roman Empire. And they spoke German, but they gave it a sort of Hebrew twist. And it was written with the Hebrew alphabet. And it's an absolutely fascinating history. One of the first books written in Yiddish was by a chap called Elias Levita, who was an Italian wandering savant Jewish guy who spoke Yiddish, and he wrote like a novel in Yiddish, which was a kind of knights in Wonderland adventures, fighting off dragons and rescuing damsels, written in Yiddish, right, which became a bestseller in the 1500s. And that guy, was a genius, he was a Kabbalist. He worked for Cardinal Egidio de Viterbo in Rome, who was the most learned cardinal of the day, and he translated the great Kabbalistic books into Latin from Hebrew, because he knew how. He was a linguist, this guy. And David Cameron, my former Prime Minister in England, was his direct descendant, which a lot of people don't know, but, hello, David. And so Yiddish became a thing, and it became the language of the Kabbalah in Ukraine. To this day in Ukraine, there are lots of Yiddish-speaking people. They use it to tell stories about God, because God, you know, the Bible is imponderable. You can't really understand it. Like, why did God kill all those people? You know, it's like weird. But the Yiddish folk tales humanized it, and there were great Yiddish writers who put into stories what was really going on. They like humanize God. He becomes a character in a folk tale, and there's a whole oral tradition of this that was written down eventually. And it's from that the Baal Shem Tov came, the great Kabbalist elder from the Ukraine, and all these amazing saints. Extraordinary like spiritual life these people had. They were poor. They were just tradesmen. They made their living by selling goods, you know, from village to village. But they were rich in culture and spirit and dreams and life, inner life. They were having mystical experiences like all the time, you know, like dreams that came true, clairvoyant experiences, telepathy. They're all in the folk tales. They're an extraordinary bunch of people, these Yiddish-speaking Jews, and they also settled in Amsterdam. The Yiddish community of Jews in Amsterdam influenced the formation of the Dutch language. There's a lot of vocabulary came in from Yiddish into Dutch, I've discovered, which is interesting because the Dutch discovered or settled New York, and some of those Yiddish speakers went to New York, and it's now a big area for Yiddish speakers in New York State, you know, and city, Manhattan. Yes. Now, I've got some bad news here, because during the Holocaust, the Germans really didn't like Yiddish speakers. They had some problem with, I mean, why, I don't know, because they were speaking a form of German. You'd thought they'd say, oh, that's fine, you know. But actually, 85% of the 6 million Jews killed in the Holocaust were Yiddish speakers. They just massacred them and slaughtered them. All over Eastern Europe, all over Poland, all over wherever they could get their hands on them, including obviously Germany. And all these people just ended up in you know, the factory death machines that were these camps. I've been to Auschwitz and seen, you know, that, and I've researched it all, and it's just a tragedy. But the good news is that it lives on. Yiddish survived. There's about 2 million Yiddish speakers now in the diaspora. And this is interesting. So when Israel was being muted and people were saying, shall we found a new state? Let's become Zionists. On the whole, the Yiddish people said, no, we don't agree with that. We're internationalists. We think Judaism should be about, it's there for us all, every nation. And we should be about bringing peace, not creating a new state that's going to cause division. And like have an army and stuff. And so, on the whole, the Yiddish speakers in Israel have been more peace-loving. They were more left-wing politically, and they were arguing for peace with the Palestinians. And still to this day, they're the most religious of all the Jews that live in Israel, and they're called the Haredi. They're the ones that wear sort of like Baal Shem Tov clothes, long big hats, long cloaks, and wear their hair long. And they want peace with the Palestinians, so much so they refuse to fight in the Israeli army. They're pacifists. And they won't accept, some of them don't accept Israel as a state. They say, no, this is satanic, we don't want to join that war. And they've been carrying protests like Not in Our Name against the destruction of Gaza. And that's interesting, isn't it? That I would regard these people as the authentic soul of the true Israel, the hidden, the invisible Israel. Okay, another thing I want to say I've been discovering is that some of my great heroes where I was born in Montreal, Jewish-speaking community of Yiddish speakers, influenced my parents. They were friends with these Jewish intellectuals when I was a little boy. A lot of them poets, writers, dreamers, playwrights, and musicians. And Leonard Cohen was one of those. He comes from the Yiddish-speaking community of Montreal. Probably met him as a baby. He was close friends with the whole set my mother was moving in the 50s in Montreal. And he's a poet troubadour. That's typical of a Yiddish kind of guy. And the other guy is Bob Dylan, who influenced me hugely as a young man. Hearing his songs, his poetry for the first time, it's like, wow, somebody thinks like I do. And he was from a Yiddish background as well in the Midwest, but his grandparents had all come, Yiddish speakers, from Odessa in the Ukraine and other parts of Eastern Europe. And he's another typical troubadour. Another guy is the novelist Saul Bellow, who I loved reading his novels, if you don't know them, another Yiddish speaker from Canada. So I think the point of doing the 99 Names of Peace book is to bring out the best of each language and each culture and say, let's find our best words in our language. What are our words for peace, for brotherhood, for fraternity, for love? Let's share those in a kind of a communion, a symbiosis of thought. And so my favourite of all the Yiddish intellectuals of Canada is this chap, Rabbi Dr. Ernest Klein. I bought this book. I came under his influence in Canada when I was there from 1977 to 81. This book says, Thomas Daffin, Calgary, Canada, 1980, right? And this is my favourite book. I have a huge library here, but this is the one I would take to a desert island. It's a comprehensive etymological dictionary of the English language, subtitled Dealing with the Origin of Words and Their Sense Development, thus illustrating the history of civilization and culture. Now this guy, he was the son of a rabbi in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, in a place that was for a while under Hungary, for a while under Romania, and then under Slovakia. It had a Jewish community, and he trained and became a rabbi at the age of 21. And he mastered 40 languages in his life. I'm just a novice in comparison to this guy. I mean, I have a smattering of 40 languages, like I know the words for peace in them all. But this guy can speak 40 languages. And his etymological dictionary of English is incredible. It goes into every root. So, you know, he gives the Hebrew, the Indo-European roots, he gives the Phoenician roots, where they're known, Aramaic. You know, he explains the interconnectedness. And when I discovered this book in 1980, it was like a light went on. I realised all the words and all the languages are all interconnected. There's actually one universal language, and we all speak little bits of it, dialects. Years later, when I discovered the Druid story about the origin of the Druids, is that we are supposed to have knowledge of that original language, which predates the fall, the Tower of Babel, which is a sort of symbolic, allegorical description of how it all went wrong. We all ended up thinking we were speaking different languages. So this guy, he also did, the last 10 years of his life, he did an etymological dictionary of Hebrew for English readers, which I also have, and I've used it for my commentaries on the Hebrew Bible and the Kabbalah and so on, and the books of Enoch. And what's so amazing about this man, he's dead now, tragic, well, I'm sure he's in the Heavenly Library, I'll see him there. But he also did an etymological dictionary of medical terms, which was never published. Its manuscript is in McMaster University in Canada. I'd love to see that published. Somebody give us a grant and, you know, we'll publish it, because medicine is very important, and knowing the origin of terms, this guy would have gone into it in great detail. Now, of course, he was from a Yiddish-speaking background. Only a Yiddish Jewish intellectual like him would bother with all this, because they know that in the words is the secret of peace. That's why Bob Dylan is so inspired in his lyrics. You know, he knows this in his blood. Whether he'd ever, I'm sure he's come across Ernest Klein, you know. So this is, I've been studying all this stuff, and I would say, without a doubt, this guy and finding this encouraged me on a path which has ended up writing the 99 Names of Peace, because it revealed to me the importance of etymology and the interconnectedness of all languages. And so the 99 Names of Peace is my sort of thank you offering to his memory. And can I just say, very tragically, his father, a great rabbi, was killed in Auschwitz in 1944. His wife and his daughter were killed in the Nazi Holocaust. And his only son also was killed in Auschwitz in 1944. So, but his his response was to find out the origin of words and languages so we can build peace. You know, because that came out of ignorance, Sophiaphobia, as does all genocides and all mass killings like that. So anyway, I'm on the team of the people trying to use etymology and language for peace, and that's why I've been going into all these seemingly obscure languages. The other one I've done this week is Etruscan, which is like the origin of many Latin words actually were Etruscan. And the alphabet we use, like, you know, the Latin alphabet, it's the Etruscan alphabet. The Latins were not very clever, they were not very civilized, they were great warriors, but they weren't real intellectuals. It was the Etruscans that were. And Claudius, one of their better emperors, married an Etruscan woman, loved Etruscan culture from Tuscany. I mean, what's not to love? The wine, the women, the sunshine, you know. And he wrote a whole book about Etruscan language and culture, which is lost. We only have fragments. So again, we have to find that in some obscure cave in Tuscany, the ancient Etruscan library of Claudius. So yes. So yeah, Etruscan, absolutely brilliant. The other language I've just been doing is Lakota, which is the Sioux language, and their word for peace is very. It rolls off the tongue. Where's my little notebook here? Yes, because the Sioux are fascinating. Obviously, they were deep people, and their medicine men brought many teachings to modern, you know, Canada and America. So yeah, Etruscan for peace is Checha. The gods was called Isar, which is interesting, Aisar. Their word for a mirror was specula, which came into Latin, and speculate is one of the roots of that, to watch, to spy out. Seeing is very important, and the Etruscans were great at seership. And the word family is an Etruscan word. They love their family. You know, you honour your parents, your brother and sister, your children. Family is very important in Etruscan culture, and that came into Latin and Italian culture. And Yiddish is shlum, which is like shalom. And the Lakota word for peace is Wolakota. I love the sound of it.
Hi.
Wolakota. And it's the same root as Lakota, meaning the people, the real people. But it's Wolakota.
Nice.
You know, so like what I'm interested in is the deep etymology of all these terms, and I want to live in a world where we spend more money on etymology and dictionaries and language studies than we do on bombs, guns, tanks and mines. I'm holding out for that. Their word in Lakota for truth and honesty, which is central to the whole cosmology, is Woyake. You know, you can just see the ancient ancestors behind these words speaking. Okay, so that's very exciting. What else to explore? Well, I think that'll do. I mean, you know, there are other things, but that is the essence of what I want to communicate about. So yes, we've got Syria. The ruler Bashar al-Assad has fled to Moscow to under the protection of another dictator, Putin. They belong together. I mean, I've had guests here from Syria, and I learned about the horrors of what he's been doing. So I think it's a good progress that they've made, the Syrian people. And I just hope that they can stick with a moderate form of Islam, a true Islam, and not be tempted to go down an extremist route, which will then give trigger signals for everyone in the so-called West to go and shun them. No, true Islam is not a threat to anyone. It's about peace, as I've explored it when I did Arabic, and also other Islamic languages like Pashto in Afghan language and others. Pashto, by the way, was explored by a Norwegian linguist who went all the way to Afghanistan in the 1920s and 30s with a letter from the King of Norway to the then King of Afghanistan saying, this guy's a great linguist, please give him access to your libraries and teach him Pashto. You know, he did. 20 years he spent out there. And he wrote an etymological dictionary of Pashto, which is an Indo-European language. And I enjoyed doing the words of peace and stuff in that. So, yes. Oh, and the other thing I just want to mention is I listened to a brilliant talk on the Scientific and Medical Network, the last lecture of this term, by Nora Bateson, who's a great intellectual living in Sweden, whose father was Gregory Bateson, who inspired me in my early studies of ecology. He wrote a very critical book called Towards an Ecology of Mind. He was trying to link consciousness with ecology. We live in a world of nature, trees, birds, animals, rivers, mountains, stars, you know, and mind. How are these interconnected? How does consciousness evolve through us and other animals, no doubt? Is it part of an ecosystem? Anyway, he's a genius and he died. But he produced this amazing daughter, Nora Bateson, who's carrying on with his work. She's just written an incredible work called Combining, which is like partly poetry, partly science, partly art, totally defying all genres she's doing, and she's a great lover of languages like me. And I was privileged to be able to hear her talk about this new book, Combining, live, and I asked her a question about the 99 Names of Peace, which you can hear on the catch-up video. And I said, basically, you know, I said, look, I'm writing a book about the 99 Names of Peace. You've been talking about communication in nature, and codes was one of her big concepts, that everything is speaking in codes to everything else, like flowers and birds and animals. And I said, okay, so with human language, have we lost sight of the unity of the languages? Have we become somehow deranged so that we privilege our language above all the others and we don't even listen to the other guys? And how can we restore and get back to a language that speaks peace? And is there a clue in the sacred traditions, like the ancient languages, like the runes, the Kabbalah, that talk about this inner hidden codes within language? Anyway, her response to my question was to say, oh, that's a big question. She spotted it, in other words, and she's brilliant. I love her. And that book is quite important, Combining. Because obviously, language, you know, is a universal thing that lives in all disciplines and all branches of knowledge. And that's kind of what Chomsky has been trying to say. Another, no doubt, of Yiddish origin, Chomsky, the great searcher for deep grammar. He's trying to find the inner hidden meaning behind all the grammars of the world. And Wittgenstein too, in his own way, was doing the same thing, going into the philosophy of language, which is what inspired me. So anyway, Nora Bateson, that was a brilliant talk she gave, which I can't recommend too highly. Yes, so that's what I've been up to. Any questions or comments from guests here? Ça va?
Oh yeah,
I've been busy.
yeah, I loved it. not questions yet. I've just been
Okay. You've been,
taking in.
it's been quite busy, yeah. Voilà, Armel?
Yes, I have a question about the Delphic Games.
Okay.
I don't know the story of your work, but what about making a local Delphic game? Because if you have some poetry or theater, maybe it's easier to make in the same language.